Rainbow Six Vegas 2 is the sequel to Rainbow Six Vegas, released in 2008 for the Xbox 360, PlayStation 3 and Microsoft Windows. And it came out the same year as SAS Secure Tomorrow and Terrorist Takedown 2. Two games dealing with a similar theme and arguably just as good as Vegas 2. Nah, I'm kidding around, both those games are terrible. I had an unopened copy of Terrorist Takedown 2 forever, which I just never got around to playing. But look, thankfully Vegas 2 is better than both of those games put together, so let's put on our thermal goggles, smash through a skylight and find out why that is, shall we? Now the story in Rainbow Six Vegas 2 takes place just before the events in the first game, with the player taking on the role of Bishop, who's either male or female at the player's discretion, working alongside Mike Walters and Park Yung shortly before they got reassigned to go off and work with Logan Keller, the protagonist in the first game. There's also the appearance of the Rainbow Six series veteran Ding Chavez, the legendary operator who's been in the game since the franchise's inception, and he's a pretty cool dude.
Let's see what your recruit can do.
Alright, let's do this.
Again, like the prequel, the story is pretty dark and violent stuff involving terrorists attacking Las Vegas and the surrounding areas, and lots of innocent people get caught in the crossfire. Rarely does the game take control away from the player, and save for those brief moments when you're in some kind of chopper being dropped off at your next mission, all information relating to the narrative is delivered in-game. And if you liked the first game, well, you should probably like this one too, because little's been changed. Thankfully though, it's done enough updates and modifications to make it feel like a proper sequel, instead of just a half-assed one with a 2 slapped on the end of it. First off, visually I think this is a much better looking game than Vegas 1, simply for the fact that they've gotten rid of that god-awful bloom that plagued so many early Unreal 3 engine games. There's actually some sense of clarity to the environments now, and the texture work seems to be a little bit sharper. The environments include expectedly casinos, penthouses and expo centers, and they genuinely feel like real and believable locations, with layouts that suit the purpose and the functions of the places they're based off. Like during the mission in the Expo Center, you'll pass through an MLG convention as you're trying to rescue some hostages. It's even got a bunch of computers set up for LAN tournaments and posters on the walls for Far Cry 2 and Splinter Cell. There's no empty Mountain Dew bottles or Dorito dust on the keyboards, but it still looks pretty good. I mean, just compare how the Vegas flyover looked in the first game compared to this one, it's like night and day. Now, I remember a lot of people saying that they thought this game looked worse than before. Now, I don't know if those people were playing it on consoles or something, but the PC version I think looks hands down superior.
There's a small office on the right.
I really like the music in this one too. It's always in the background without being overbearing, and I think that's the definition of good video game music. It's the kind of stuff that just does its own thing without distracting the player. If you listen for it, it's there and it sounds good. Not that it really matters though, because we all know that people don't really care about all that shit. It's the gameplay that matters most, and for all intents and purposes, Vegas 2's only really made a few key changes, but left the base gameplay intact for the most part. As they say, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. The real sort of major change with Rainbow Six Vegas 2 is the ACES system, which stands for Advanced Combat Enhancement and Specializations, which is just a fancy name for rewarding the player for making certain kinds of kills. In the first game, you could kill terrorists until the cows came home without really getting all that much in return. But now in Vegas 2, you're leveling up one of 3 categories: Marksmanship, Assault, and CQB each time you take someone down. Marksmanship is the easiest one to level up. You get this from making headshots, killing enemies from long range, basically just being good at the game and not a total scrub. Assault and CQB are a little bit more situational, whereas Marksman comes up naturally during gameplay. Assault is earned by killing enemies with explosives, shooting through cover, or using turrets. And CQB, is a close quarters category, and it includes killing enemies from point blank range, from behind, or when their vision is obscured from smoke grenades or flashbangs, among a couple others. Now this whole ACES system is kind of important because unlike the first game, you don't get access to all of the weapons and gear from the get-go, and leveling up each of these categories unlocks new stuff to use. Not to mention you've got your base play level as well, which levels up per kill regardless of what category that kill might fall under. What it also means is that you just can't let your AI teammates do all the work. I mean, you can if you want to, but you're missing out on that much important experience that's going to unlock all the bigger and better items. When you're shooting things, I'd say that assault rifles still rule the roost here and offer up a good combination of damage, accuracy, and range, with sniper rifles not being all that handy most of the time because of the increased enemy count, and the fact that combat plays out more often in medium to long range this time around also makes shotguns feel less effective too. What I do like about this whole thing though is that you can progress outside of the campaign in the terrorist hunt mode, and it all carries across even if you get killed so you don't lose your progress, which overall makes it feel like less of a grind. Having said that though, if you're going to max all this stuff out, you're going to need to grind it out at one point or another. and I can remember replaying the exploits in certain terrorist hunt maps over and over on my PS3 back in the day. Now, I still really enjoy this mechanic. I mean, I don't know why, but there's just something so rewarding and addictive about leveling up all the time and getting new shit to play around with. Leveling up the player specifically unlocks primarily armor, and there's actually a fair bit of customization this time around too. You can choose from either a male or female operator, and on the PS3 and Xbox 360, you could even upload a photo to texture map across your player's face, though it never seemed to work out properly. The armor's also a new inclusion too, able to be equipped on your chest, shoulders, arms and legs, and you choose pieces depending on how much mobility and protection you want, with the high protection pieces decreasing your mobility at the expense of keeping you alive a little bit longer. Considering it's a tactical shooter though, where you die really quickly and you're not going to be exactly bunny hopping through the levels, it seems kinda silly to not just turn yourself into a walking tank and equip the best armor possible. The reason for this too is because the enemies this time around are a hell of a lot more aggressive and I think abundant too. Like, these guys don't mess around. They really do not like you and they aren't shy of expressing that. I think this game also has some of the funniest enemy banter I've heard in a video game. I had a bit of trouble catching this during recording, but it's things like hearing an enemy complain after you've killed someone because the person you just killed owed them money. Sometimes they might trash talk you during combat, or you can hear them arguing about who should expose themselves to flank you. It reminds me a lot of the chatter you'd hear between the replicas in Fear, and the fact that it's unique to the situation makes it a lot more believable. It's easier to overlook this during combat because you're concentrating on not getting killed, but it's hard not to smile those few times you do hear it. On the downside, it seems maybe they ran out of coding space or something, because whilst the enemy's AI seems more intelligent, the AI for your teammates seems a little bit dumber. I reckon they definitely move a lot slower than they did in the first game, taking a few more seconds to ready up on doors as an example. And plenty of times they'd also get stuck in a doorway when they tried to walk through it at the same time, like they're doing some kind of slapstick comedy routine. One of the new mechanics is that they can throw a grenade at a specific spot, handy for flushing out bad guys who are in cover, but half the time I tried this, they simply just didn't do it. Now look, it's not like it happens all the time, but it does definitely happen more than it did in the first game, and it's a bit of a bummer. When they work properly though, your squad is super effective at taking out all the bad guys, but still, like the prior game, their life is kind of in your hands. Breaching a room, for instance, is as easy as the press of a button, and they'll do it well 99% of the time as long as you put them in the right position and choose the best method. But even after they've breached a room or entered through a doorway, they'll often just stand there waiting for you to tell them what to do next. And if you don't direct them to cover and leave them to their own devices, they're going to get taken out pretty quickly. It's definitely a far more challenging game, I reckon, than its predecessor, which, as I said before, is a mix of the enemy's increased aggression and what I perceive to be a higher enemy count. You'll probably even die multiple times in certain areas, and you really have to use all the tools the game gives you. This is a positive change. It really is a matter of getting good more than anything else, and even when you are killed, it's still so much fun reapproaching a gunfight from a different angle, coming in from a different vantage point and giving it another shot, no pun intended. It's odd in that way that even when the game is turkey slapping you over and over, it's still fun to an extent. There is one part of the game though I really dislike, which is one of the last missions in the game where you're forced to go lone wolf after Jung and Walters go off to work with Logan Keller. Now look, I get what they're trying to do with this. They're just trying to really mix it up a bit, and you really have to stealth through these sections with a silencer on your weapon, or you'll just get bombarded with enemies. But it's just not all that much fun. When you take away the teammates, aka the thing that makes Rainbow Six Vegas so enjoyable, you're left with a pretty standard FPS, and one where you die insanely quickly due to the pseudo-realism of the combat. Thankfully though, for the final mission in the game, these guys come back, so it doesn't end on a downer. Like the first game, Rainbow Six Vegas 2 also had a pretty robust multiplayer mode with a really active community, and it's sadly a community that's all but dead nowadays. You still can play through the terrorist hunt mode outside of the campaign, either solo with the AI teammates or with friends in co-op, which is the best way to do it. And the inclusion of the ACES system actually creates an incentive to do this. You know what, Rainbow Six Vegas isn't a perfect game, but it mostly takes what works with the first one and improves it generally across the board, and I think overall it's probably my favourite of the two. I remember when it came out, I originally had it on PS3, and 2008 was kind of a shitty year for me. Not to sound like a pussy, but I pretty much had no money at that time. I'd broken up with a girlfriend, and one of the solaces I had was gaming, and I'd spend countless hours just grinding out the ACES system in Terrorist Hunt as a way to keep myself preoccupied. I don't know, maybe that's why I look back on this one more fondly than the first one, and I reckon it's probably got a similar place in a lot of other gamers' memories as well. Rainbow Six purists will probably say it's the downfall of the series, and look, maybe that's true to some extent if you look at the old games with rose-tinted glasses like so many people do, but I still consider both Vegas 1 and 2 to be highly enjoyable games. They've got simple controls, engaging gameplay, they're challenging without feeling cheap, and they tell a decent story. At a time when Rainbow Six is probably the most popular it's ever been, with the dominance of Rainbow Six Siege in the industry, I'd say it's still worth going back and checking this one out, either solo or with friends. There is still a damn good game here, one that's challenging and still has a decent amount of tactical elements to differentiate it from a lot of the other mindless shooting games from the same time period. And if you don't want to play, you can just go back and play Terrorist Takedown too. I know someone who might have a copy.